The night on the small human colony world was quiet. Too quiet. The streets were empty, the lights dim, and most people were asleep. But above the colony, the stars moved in strange patterns, as if something heavy was pressing through the black sky. A ship was coming and no one had called for it. Daniel, a human engineer, lived alone on the edge of the colony. He was not rich, not powerful, not even well known. He spent his days fixing broken machines and keeping old engines alive. To him, the night was the same as always. Silence, metal, and the hum of his workshop. But this night would not stay silent. Without warning, alarms echoed through the colony. Dark vessel broke through the clouds, large and sharp like the claw of a beast. It landed on the main square, shaking the ground and filling the air with smoke. The people rushed from their homes, whispering and pointing. Ships like this belonged to warlords, not traitors, not allies. What was it doing here? The vessel opened, and out came soldiers dressed in black armor. They carried no warmth in their eyes, only cold orders. Behind them, a metal container was pushed forward, sealed and glowing with strange symbols. The leader of the soldiers stepped down and shouted, "The tribute has been delivered." And without waiting for questions, the soldiers returned to their ship. Within minutes, the dark vessel lifted back into the sky and vanished into the stars. The people were frozen. No one dared to touch the container. Everyone knew what a tribute meant in alien culture. It was a gift, a token, a symbol of loyalty or control. But to whom had this tribute been sent? The answer came faster than anyone wanted. A mistake in the records, a fault in the system. The delivery name on the container was not for a governor, not for a commander. It was for Daniel, the quiet engineer who lived at the edge of the colony. The crowd murmured, laughed nervously, and pointed in disbelief. Daniel himself stepped forward, confused, shaking his head. "This is not mine," he said. "I never asked for this." But the container opened with a hiss and all eyes turned silent. Inside was a girl, not human but alien. Her skin was pale with a faint glow, her eyes large and silver. She looked fragile, small and afraid. She stumbled out of the container. Chains on her wrists, the people gasped, whispers spread, "A slave! A gift!" But the girl did not speak to them. Her eyes went straight to Daniel, wide, desperate, pleading. Daniel stepped back. "I think there has been a mistake," he said quickly. He tried to push the container away, but the girl moved closer. Her chains clinked, her hands shook, but her voice finally came out soft and broken. "Please, do not send me back." The crowd erupted in questions. "Send her to the governor. Return her before the soldiers come back. This is dangerous. We cannot anger the warlords." But Daniel could not move. The girl's eyes were filled with fear so deep it cut through his heart. This was no simple gift. This was something else, something darker. The colony leader stepped forward and shouted, "Daniel, this is not for you. Give her up before trouble comes." But the girl clung to his arm, trembling. Her chains burned his skin cold, but still he did not pull away. He looked down at her, and for a moment, it was only the two of them. He saw not a gift, not a burden, but a lost being begging for safety. The night stretched heavy over the colony. The people argued, the leader threatened, but Daniel stayed silent. Finally, he nodded once and led the girl away from the square. Gasps and anger followed him. "You fool," someone shouted. "You will bring death on us all." Another cried. But Daniel walked on, his steps firm, though his mind raced with fear. Inside his workshop, he sat the girl down. She shivered as if the air was too sharp. He offered her water, and she drank quickly as if she had not tasted freedom in years. Her voice came again, weak but clear. "My name is Arinya," she whispered. "I was not meant for you, but you are the first one who looked at me like I am alive." Daniel froze. Questions swirled in his mind. Why had the warlords sent her here? Why? To him of all people, and what did she mean by not meant for you? Outside, the colony slept uneasily, but in Daniel's workshop, the world had already changed. One mistake, one gift, one frightened alien girl, and nothing would ever be the same again. Morning came slowly over the colony. The sun rose above the dusty hills, but the people did not feel its warmth. Whispers spread through the streets, whispers about the alien girl, about the mistake, and about the man who had taken her. Daniel's name was on every tongue, not with respect, but with fear. Inside his workshop, Daniel worked in silence. Arinya sat in a corner, still chained, her silver eyes following him. She had not slept, her body tense as if shadows might break through the walls and take her away. Daniel could feel her fear, even when she said nothing. The sound of his tools, the clink of metal, was the only comfort. In the room, at last, Daniel put his tools down. He looked at her, confused, tired, but determined to understand. "Why did they send you here?" he asked. Arinya lowered her head. "I do not know," she whispered, her voice cracked like glass. "I was told I would be given away, to a man of power. But you are not like them." Daniel almost laughed, bitter and short. "No, I'm not powerful," he said. "I fix old machines, I live alone, I have nothing, not even friends." Arinya's eyes softened. "Maybe. That is why they fear you less." Her words hung in the air, strange and heavy. Before Daniel could answer, the screen on his wall flickered alive. It was a transmission, an official message. The face of a colony officer appeared, pale and sweating. "Daniel," the officer said sharply, "you must return the alien girl. Immediately a signal came last night. The warlords demand her back. They know she was given to you by mistake, and they are not patient men." Daniel clenched his fists. He wanted to shout that he never asked for this. But before he could speak, Arinya stepped forward, her chains rattling. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If I go back, I will never return. I will be broken, used, destroyed." Her silver eyes locked on his, desperate. "Do not send me back." The officer's voice grew harder. "This is not your choice, Daniel. This is about the safety of the colony. If you keep her, you put us all in danger." The transmission ended, leaving silence behind. Daniel stood still for a long moment. His heart beat fast, his thoughts screamed he could give her back and stay safe, or he could keep her and risk everything. He looked at her again, at the chains, at the terror in her face. And slowly, something inside him shifted. That night, the colony grew restless. Warnings appeared on the sky screens. "Return the tribute or punishment will come." Shadows moved among the stars, ships, watching, waiting. The people grew angry, pointing at Daniel's workshop, muttering curses. Some shouted in the streets, "Give her back." Others whispered, "The warlords will burn us all because of one man." Inside the workshop, Daniel made a decision. He picked up his cutter and kneeled beside Arinya. She flinched as the sparks flew, but the chains fell to the ground with a heavy sound. For the first time, her wrists were free. She looked at him, stunned. You should not have done this," she whispered. "They will come for you now." Daniel shrugged, but his eyes were firm. "Let them come," he said. "You're not their property anymore." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Arinya's lips curved into the smallest fragile smile. It was not joy, it was not freedom yet, but it was hope. A hope she had not felt in a long time. That night, Daniel asked her about her people. Arinya told him of the Silent Weavers, a race once free, now enslaved. They were born with a gift, the power to weave threads of energy. With these threads, they could heal, protect, even create weapons of light. The warlords used them as slaves, gifts, tools of fear. Her family was gone, her world destroyed. She was one of the last, and she had been sent as a present, a living weapon wrapped in chains. Daniel listened in silence. The more she spoke, the more his anger grew. The warlords saw her as nothing but a gift. But to him, she was a person, a life worth more than machines, more than orders, more than fear. As the night deepened, strange signals crackled through the colony's comms. Threats, warnings, promises of destruction. If the girl was not returned, the people trembled, and even the leaders began to prepare for surrender. But Daniel and Arinya sat in the workshop, the faint hum of machines around them. For the first time, Arinya's shoulders lowered, her breath eased. She looked at Daniel and whispered, "You are the wrong man they chose, but maybe you are the right one for me." Outside, Ships circled in the dark sky like wolves around a campfire. Inside, a choice had been made. Daniel would not return her, and the galaxy would soon learn what it meant to cross a man who had nothing left to lose. The days after the arrival of Arinya were heavy with fear. Ships still circled above the colony like vultures in the sky. Every morning new warnings appeared on the comm screens. Return the tribute or face destruction. But Daniel ignored them even though the whole colony turned against him. People avoided his workshop. Mothers pulled their children away when he walked near. Whispers followed him everywhere. Why protect her? He will bring death on us all. Madman. He is cursed now. Daniel heard it, but he did not answer. He kept his head down, working with machines as he always had. The only difference was that now, he was not alone. Arinya stayed close, always watching. At first she moved like a shadow, afraid to touch anything, but slowly, little by little, she began to help him. When Daniel repaired an old generator, she held tools for him. When sparks flew, she covered his hands with strange glowing threads that stopped the burns. Her energy weaving was quiet, delicate, but powerful. It was not just a skill, it was a part of her soul. One evening, when the lights flickered and the power lines failed, Daniel cursed under his breath, but Arinya stepped forward. Her fingers stretched, silver light flowing between them. Threads of pure energy spread across the wires. In seconds, the lights burned. Bright again, stronger than before. Daniel stared in awe. You fixed the entire grid, he whispered. Arinya only lowered her eyes. It is what my people do, or what we once did, before chains. From that night, Daniel looked at her differently, not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as a miracle he did not deserve. Still, questions burned inside him. Why had she been sent to him? Why had the warlords risked sending someone so valuable, so powerful to a simple engineer? One night, Daniel asked her again. Arinya sat by the fire, her silver eyes reflecting the flames. I told you the truth, she said, her voice soft. They wanted me to be given to a man of power, so they could control him through me. But I was delivered to you instead. Perhaps by mistake or perhaps fate. She looked at him then, her eyes deep and searching. You are not like them, Daniel. You look at me as if I am alive, not a weapon. Daniel had no answer. He only nodded, though inside his chest a storm raged. He had never asked for her, never wanted this. But now he could not imagine letting her go. While their bond grew stronger, the colony grew colder. The leaders sent guards to his door. They shouted threats, demanding he hand her over. But Daniel barred the door and refused. You want her? He said, his voice steady. Come and take her yourself. No one dared step inside. They feared not Daniel, but the silver-eyed girl at his side. That night, when the streets went dark, strangers crept near his workshop. They threw stones at his windows, cursed his name. Give her back, they cried. But Daniel stood at the door with his old plasma cutter. Arinya stood behind him, threads glowing faintly in her hands. The crowd saw the light and scattered like frightened birds. When silence returned, Daniel turned to her. You don't have to fight, he said softly. But Arinya shook her head. You gave me freedom, Daniel. Now I will protect you. The days stretched into weeks. Their bond grew deeper with every shared meal, every silent glance. Daniel taught her simple human things. How to fix an engine, how to cook simple food, how to laugh at bad jokes. And she, in return, showed him the weaving, threads of energy that could mend metal, heal wounds, even create shields. He watched her weave patterns of light in the air, delicate like spider silk, glowing like stars, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt alive. But danger never left. Messages from the warlords grew darker. The last transmission shook the entire colony. Return the tribute, or we will burn your world to ash. The leaders grew desperate. They gathered in secret, whispering of betraying Daniel, of handing Arinya over without his consent. They feared death more than they feared dishonor. One night, Arinya felt the tension. In the air, she turned to Daniel, her voice trembling. They will come for me soon, not just the warlords, but your own people. You should let me go, save yourself. Daniel's jaw tightened. No, he said firmly. You're not going anywhere, not while I'm still breathing. Arinya's silver eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her. Not as a tool, not as a gift, but as a person. Outside, the colony prepared for betrayal. Above, the ships circled like hungry predators, but inside Daniel's workshop, two unlikely souls sat together, a lonely man and a broken alien girl bound not by chains but by trust. And together, they were becoming something stronger than either had ever known. The night was restless. Clouds hung heavy over the colony, and every light flickered like it feared the darkness. People moved nervously through the streets, whispering of ships in the sky. The warlords had not stayed silent. They were coming. Daniel stood at the edge of his workshop, tools on his belt, his plasma cutter in hand. Beside him, Arinya's silver eyes glowed faint in the dark, her fingers weaving thin threads of light that hovered like a shield. Neither spoke, but both knew. Tonight would change everything. The first ship landed just before dawn. It was not the massive warlord vessel, but a smaller hunter craft, sharp like a blade. Engines screamed as it cut through the air, landing on the colony's outskirts. The ground shook, dust rising, alarms blaring. Doors opened and soldiers stepped. Out tall armored, their faces hidden behind black masks. Hunters, the warlord's loyal enforcers. The colony leader called the people together. His voice was shaky, but his words were clear. "The warlords demand the girl," he said. "If we do not give her back, they will burn us all. Daniel has brought this danger here. We must correct his mistake." The crowd roared with fear and anger. They pointed at the edge of the colony where Daniel's workshop stood. "Give her up," they cried. "Hand over the alien girl." Inside the workshop, Daniel and Arinya heard every word. Arinya's hands trembled as she clutched the table. "They will come for me," she whispered. "Your people will betray you." Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the door. "Let them try," he said. "They won't take you, not while I'm alive." The hunters marched into the colony, their boots heavy, their voices sharp. "Where is the tribute?" they shouted. "Bring her out, or we will search every house, burn every home." Fear spread like fire. Families shut their doors. Children hid under blankets. And then, at last, the hunters turned toward Daniel's workshop. They kicked the door open. The sound was loud, sharp, final. But inside they found not weakness. They found Daniel standing tall. His plasma cutter buzzed in his hand, glowing with heat. Behind him, Arinya stood, her silver threads floating in the air like living light. "They." Lead hunter pointed at her. "Return the tribute," he barked. "She belongs to the warlord, not to you." Daniel stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "She belongs to no one." The hunter laughed, a cold, empty sound. "Then you will die with her." The fight began in fire. Hunters charged, weapons blazing. Daniel swung his cutter, sparks flying as steel met energy. He moved fast, sharper than he had in years. Every strike was fueled not by duty, but by choice. His choice to protect. Arinya raised her hands, silver light bursting from her fingers, threads wrapped around the hunter's weapons, snapping them in half. Shields of glowing fabric appeared before Daniel, blocking deadly blasts. The hunters shouted in anger, but their voices cracked with fear. They had not expected resistance, not from a lone man and a chained girl. Outside, the colony gathered in silence. They watched as light and fire filled the workshop. They watched Daniel and Arinya fight together, and for the first time some felt doubt. Perhaps this man was not a fool. Perhaps this girl was not a curse. The battle ended with silence. Hunters lay broken on the ground, their weapons melted, their masks shattered. The survivors dragged their wounded back to the ship. Their leader hissed a final warning. "You cannot fight us all, human. The warlord himself will come." Then they fled into the sky, leaving smoke and fear behind. Daniel breathed heavy, sweat on his face. Arinya sank to the floor, trembling. Her threads fading into the air. For a moment there was peace, but outside the colony leader shouted again, his voice sharp with rage. "You've doomed us all, Daniel. They will return with greater force. We cannot protect you. We cannot protect her. Leave this place before they destroy us." The crowd echoed his words. "Leave," they cried. "Take her away." Daniel looked at Arinya. still shaking, still afraid, she whispered. I told you. They will not stand with us. Daniel knelt beside her, his voice soft but sure. Then we don't need them. That night, Daniel packed what little he had, tools, rations, fuel. He loaded his old ground vehicle, preparing for the journey beyond the colony. Arinya watched, her heart heavy but hopeful. She had been given as a gift, a slave meant for a warlord, but now she was something else, something free. As they drove away under the shadow of circling ships, Daniel gripped the controls tightly, his voice cut through the hum of the engine. They'll come for us, Arinya. They won't stop, but let them come. Arinya's silver eyes glowed brighter, her threads weaving around the vehicle like a protective cocoon. Then we will fight them together, she whispered. Behind them, the colony shrank into the distance. Before them, the wild unknown stretched wide and endless. Hunters would follow, warlords would rage, but for now 2 unlikely souls moved forward. Not as master and gift, not as prisoner and guard, but as allies, as something more. The warlords had made a mistake, and that mistake was about to change the galaxy. The road beyond. The colony stretched into endless desert. Dust rose in clouds behind Daniel's old ground vehicle, the engine groaning under the weight of supplies. The stars above shone cold and distant, but Daniel's eyes stayed sharp on the horizon. Beside him, Arinya sat silent, her silver eyes fixed on the endless night. They had left the colony behind, left the angry voices, the betrayal, and the fear, but they had not left danger. Every few hours, Daniel saw shadows in the sky, hunter ships, circling, watching, waiting for the order to strike. He knew it was only a matter of time before the warlord himself would come. At night, they stopped near broken ruins, old structures left by colonists long gone. Daniel built a small fire, the glow fighting back the cold wind. Arinya sat across from him, her hands folded tightly. She had barely spoken since the battle. Her silence weighed heavier than the desert itself. Finally, Daniel broke it. You've been hiding something, he said quietly, his voice steady. You know more than you've told me. Why did they send you? Why risk so much for you? Arinya flinched, her silver eyes flickering in the firelight. For a long moment she said nothing. Then her voice came, soft but sharp. Because I am not only a gift, I am a weapon. Daniel frowned, but she continued before he could speak. My people, the silent weavers, were once free. We could weave energy into light, into shields, into healing threads. But the warlords discovered something darker. They found that our weaving could reach not only machines, but minds. Her fingers trembled as she lifted them, silver threads spilling from her skin. The threads danced in the air, weaving into patterns like spider webs. She closed her eyes, and Daniel felt a strange pull in his head, like a whisper, not of words, but of feelings. Fear, trust, pain, hope. He shook his head quickly, breaking free, his breath heavy. Arinya lowered her hands, her voice shaking. That is why they want me. That is why I was sent as a tribute. I was not meant to be a gift of peace. I was meant to be a leash. Given to a human leader, I could twist his mind, control his thoughts, make him obey the warlords without even knowing. Daniel's face hardened, his stomach twisted with anger. They wanted to use you to enslave us, he whispered. Arinya nodded, tears sliding down her pale skin. And if I refused, they would break me until I obeyed. They trained others like me. Some gave in, some were destroyed. I escaped only because of a mistake, a simple error in their system. Instead of sending me to a leader, they sent me to you. For a long time, silence filled the ruins. The fire crackled, the desert wind howled. Daniel stared into the flames, his mind racing. The truth was worse than he had imagined. This girl was not only hunted because she escaped. She was the key to an entire plan of control. And now the warlords would do anything to reclaim her. Arinya's voice cracked again. You should have left me, Daniel. If they know you protect me, they will destroy you, destroy everything you care about. Her silver eyes glistened, filled with guilt. I did not want to hurt anyone. I only wanted to be free. Daniel's jaw tightened. He reached across the fire and gripped her trembling hand. You are not a weapon, he said firmly. You're not their leash. You're not their tool. Whatever they made you for, you choose. What you are now, and I choose to stand with you. Arinya stared at him, her lips parted. For the first time in her life, someone had said those words, not seeing her as a curse, not as a prize, but as a person. Her tears fell, but this time they carried a strange lightness. Before they could speak more, the ground trembled. Engines roared in the distance, dust clouds rising on the horizon. Hunter, ships closing in. The warlord had heard of their defiance, and he was sending more than soldiers this time. Daniel stood quickly, grabbing his cutter. We move now, he said. We'll head for the canyons, lose them in the rocks. Arinya rose beside him, her threads glowing faint, she whispered. They will not stop, Daniel. Not until I am theirs again. Daniel looked at her, his eyes hard. Then they'll have to go through me first. They packed their things and rushed into the night. The desert echoed with the sound of engines behind them, hunters sweeping low, searching with beams of light, but in the darkness Daniel and Arinya pressed on, running not just from death but from the chains of her past. Above them, the sky cracked with thunder. The warlord's flagship was coming, and with it, the battle that would decide more than just Arinya's fate. It would decide the future of humans, the silent weavers, and perhaps the galaxy itself. The desert night trembled under the roar of engines. Lights swept across the sand as hunter ships searched the ground. Above them, the warlord's flagship broke through the clouds, larger than anything the colony had ever seen. Its shadow covered the land like a hand closing into a fist. Daniel drove the vehicle into the canyons. The narrow cliffs rose on both sides, sharp and jagged. It was the only place where the massive ships could not easily follow. Arinya held onto the frame, her silver eyes glowing brighter in the dark. Her threads of light wove around the vehicle, shielding it from falling rocks and enemy blasts. Behind them, hunters closed in. Engines screamed, weapons fired, explosions shook the canyon walls. Daniel swerved hard, his old machine rattling under the strain. We can't outrun them forever, he shouted. Arinya's voice rose above the chaos, steady but filled with fear. Then we do not run, Daniel, we fight. They stopped at a wide clearing in the canyon. The hunters landed, their armored boots hitting the ground. Dozens of them, armed and ready, their masks reflecting the glow of their weapons. And then, silence fell as the warlord himself descended. He was taller than any human, his armor black and gold, his eyes burning with cruel fire. His voice rolled like thunder across the canyon. Human, he said, pointing at Daniel. You hold what is mine. The weaver belongs to me. She is my tribute, my weapon, my leash for your kind. Give her to me, and I may spare your worthless life. Daniel stood in front of Arinya, his plasma cutter humming in his hand. His voice was low, calm, but unshakable. She doesn't belong to you, he said. The warlord laughed, the sound echoing through the cliffs. Foolish man, you cannot stand against me. You are alone, weak, broken, you are nothing. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes never leaving the warlord. Maybe I am nothing, he said, but she is everything. The warlord raised his hand and the hunters charged. The canyon erupted in fire and light. Daniel fought at the front, his cutter slicing through armor, sparks flying. Every strike was fueled not by skill but by determination. Behind him, Arinya lifted her hands and the air shimmered. Silver threads burst from her fingers, weaving into shields that blocked blasts. She spun them into whips of light, striking hunters to the ground. Her eyes blazed brighter than the weapons around her. For the first time, she did not hide her power. She unleashed it. The hunters fell one by one, but more came, endless, like a wave crashing against a shore. Daniel stumbled, his arm cut, his chest burning with pain. But Arinya caught him, her threads wrapping around his wounds, healing them with silver light. Stand, Daniel, she whispered. We are not finished. The warlord stepped forward, his massive blade glowing with fire. He struck, the ground shaking under the force. Daniel barely blocked. The plasma cutter, sparking, the warlord laughed again, pushing him down. You cannot stop me, he roared. You are only a man. Then Arinya screamed, her voice filled with fury and sorrow. Her threads exploded outward. hundreds of glowing strands filling the canyon sky. They wrapped around the warlord's blade, his armor, his very body. He roared, trying to break free, but the threads tightened, her silver eyes burned like stars. "You will not take me," she cried, her voice echoing through the canyon. "You will not chain me again." The warlord staggered, his strength failing as the threads sank deeper. He tried to reach Daniel, to strike him down, but Daniel rose, his cutter burning bright. With a final swing, he struck the warlord's armor, sparks exploding. The canyon filled with a blinding flash as Arinya's threads pulled tight. When the light faded, silence fell. The warlord lay broken on the ground. His armor shattered, his fire gone. The hunters froze, their weapons lowered, their courage lost. Without their master, they had no will to fight. One by one, they retreated, their ships rising into the sky. The flagship trembled, engines failing under the strain of the Weaver's light. Then it turned and vanished into the stars. Daniel stood shaking, his chest heaving. Arinya knelt beside him, her hands still glowing faint. Her threads faded slowly, dissolving into the air like smoke. For the first time since she had been taken, her chains were truly gone. The canyon was quiet, the night still. But everything had changed. Daniel and Arinya had faced the warlord and survived. Not as master and slave, not as human and alien, but as two souls who had chosen each other. Arinya looked at him, her voice soft, trembling. "You should have let me go. You should not have risked everything." Daniel shook his head, his eyes, tired but steady. "I told you before, Arinya, you're not theirs, and now, you're not alone." Above them, the stars shone brighter than before, but hidden in the distance, more dangers waited. The warlord was defeated, but his empire was not, and Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had taken notice, and soon they would all learn the price of protecting one alien girl. The canyon lay silent after the battle. Smoke drifted from the rocks. Broken weapons glowed in the sand. The warlord was gone. His hunters fled, but the echoes of their fight still clung to the air. Daniel stood unsteady, his cutter sparking weakly in his hand. Beside him, Arinya's silver eyes dimmed as her glowing threads faded. For the first time in her life, she was not bound by chains. They walked slowly back to the vehicle. Daniel's steps were heavy, his wounds aching despite her healing light, but Arinya stayed close, her hand brushing his arm, steadying him. She did not speak, but her silence was not fear anymore. It was something new, something that felt like belonging. When the sun rose over the desert, painting the sky in gold, Daniel stopped the vehicle on a ridge, looking back at the colony far in the distance. He knew the people there would not welcome him again. To them, he was still a fool who had brought danger, but Daniel no longer cared. He had made his choice, and that choice sat beside him, alive and free. Arinya watched the horizon, her voice soft. "They will come again," she whispered. "The warlord is gone, but his empire is vast. Others will rise in his place, and they will hunt me until the end." Daniel gripped the steering bar tighter, his eyes hard. "Then we keep moving," he said. "They can hunt us, but they'll never take you back." For days, they traveled through empty lands. They slept under the stars, shared food, fixed machines together. Every moment drew them closer. Every word built a bond stronger than chains. Arinya began to smile more, her laughter quiet, but real. She told him stories of her people, how the silent weavers once sang as they wove light into bridges that touched the sky. Daniel listened, and for the first time in years he laughed too. Not bitter, not hollow, but true. But the galaxy had not forgotten them. News spread quickly. Whispers of a human who defied a warlord. Whispers of a weaver who broke her chains and destroyed her master. On distant worlds, slaves whispered her name like hope, and warlords cursed it like poison. One night, while they camped near the ruins of an old starport, Arinya sat by the fire, weaving thin threads of silver into the air. Daniel watched as they formed a shape glowing softly. It was not a shield, not a weapon. It was a small figure, two shapes standing side by side, holding hands, her eyes lifted to his, uncertain. "It is us," she whispered, "as I see us." Daniel's throat tightened. He reached out, touching the glowing threads before they faded. Into the night. For a man who had lived alone for so long, forgotten by his own people, the meaning was clear. He was no longer alone. But peace never lasted long. Scouts appeared in the sky. Ships searching the ruins. Daniel and Arinya hid among the broken towers, waiting in silence. The enemy passed this time, but Daniel knew the truth. They would never stop, not until Arinya was back in chains or until she was destroyed. That night, Arinya finally spoke the words she had carried inside for so long. "You should not stay with me, Daniel. I bring danger to everything I touch. If you let me go, you can still live in peace." Daniel turned sharply, his voice firm. "No," he said. "Listen to me. You were given as a gift to the wrong man, but you are not leaving, because I don't see you as a gift. I see you as mine. My choice, my fight, my family." Her silver eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of fear this time. They were tears of belonging. For the first time since her capture, she felt like she had a place in the galaxy. Not as a weapon, not as property, but as herself. When dawn came, Daniel stood on the ruins of the starport, looking at the rising sun. Ships still circled in the far distance. The Empire was still vast, the dangers endless. But Arinya stood beside him, her threads weaving around his arm, not as chains, but as bonds of light. Together, they looked out at the horizon. The warlords had made a mistake. They had sent a girl as a tribute to the wrong man, but that mistake had grown into something far greater. A man who once had nothing, and a girl who once was broken, now stood together, stronger than armies, brighter than fear. And though the galaxy did not know it yet, the bond between Daniel and Arinya would change everything, not just for humans, not just for silent weavers, but for all who longed to be free. For she was no longer a gift, she was no longer a weapon, she was his own, and he was hers.